G'day, and welcome to AOS Coach. It's fair to say that in my time playing Warhammer, I have been to a fair few tournaments. And one of the things I get asked quite often is what do I bring to a tournament and what is sitting in my tournament toolkit? I recognize there is a lot of new players coming into the hobby, so I thought, being the prepared person that I am, I would give you a bit of a sneak peek into what I bring to tournaments so you can be better prepared for your next event. Starting things off at the absolute bare basics is going to be your rules. Now, I've assumed that you brought your army. If you haven't brought your army to an event, you're in for a bad time. But you've got that packed away, happy days. Now let's get to the bare basics here. You're going to need your rules. I don't have a photographic memory, so I'm going to need my rules at least as a reference point that I might need during the event. But it's important to have my battle tome and my general's handbook, the current general's handbook, for all of my rules, my scenario battle plan rules, anything that might be relevant to me. If I'm playing at an event, often they'll have things like a player's pack that will have the schedule and relevant information. I'll want all of this stuff either physically or digitally. I prefer normally digitally. It means I'm traveling a little bit lighter and I can bookmark certain things, but each up to yourselves. The next thing I've got here is AOS reminders. If you're new to the channel, you may not have heard of AOS reminders. If you've been here for a while, you know I'm an absolute fan. But basically, it will allow you to put all of your rules in a clean and easy sheet. It's a free tool. Go check it out, AOS reminders. Link will be below. But it'll put all of your rules in a simple sheet. And at minimum, it's a checklist for you to make sure that when you get to the combat phase, you haven't forgotten key buffs and abilities that you needed to apply earlier on. At worst, it means that you aren't going to be flicking through all of the different pages in your battle tome for your various rules and interactions and when you apply certain things. Is it the start? Is it in the middle? Is it any time? Either way, very, very simple, very, very easy. Big fan of having AOS reminders up your sleeve. In addition, I'll carry around War Scroll cards, my secondary objective cards, my battle plan cards, my Realm of Battle cards. These things help me from flicking from the different books and having them readily available on the table that I can quickly see the realm of Ulgu and what the realm rules are going to be for this particular realm, and I can use them during the game. You can pick these up normally at Games Workshop, or sometimes they are just limited runs, so you might need to search around to see if your army still has a current set of these cards. In addition, you're obviously going to need dice. You're going to need a fair few dice. You're going to need enough dice to be able to roll your sequence of attacks. So if you're rolling 30 or 40 attacks in any given combat phase, you might want to have 30 or 40 so you're not having to roll different sets. Up to you. That's how I personally like to do it. But one consideration that I have is when I roll a lot of dice, I like to go to smaller dice. So your normal stock standard dice is a 16 millimeter dice. I like to go down to a 12 millimeter dice if I'm rolling a lot of attacks. It just means that I can put more dice in my hand and do the attack sequence. In addition, I want to make sure that it's very easy for me and my opponent to know what I'm rolling. So I will make sure that my special symbols are restricted to only one number. And that helps avoid confusion. So often you'll get custom dice, whether it's made by Games Workshop, where you buy from somewhere else. I like to have dice that are thematic to my army. My Gits, for example, have a set of dice that are bad moon symboled on their sixes. And that's really easy. When you see the bad moon symbol, it means it's a 6. What I want to avoid is having a skull on the 1. So when I roll the dice, special symbol is 6. But speaking of rolling dice, one thing that it really grinds my gears is when I roll a set of dice and my dice go everywhere across the table. They don't roll flat, they hit a terrain piece and I don't know, is it a 6 or a 3? They knock models around. So one easy way to contain your dice is by putting it in a dice box or a dice tray as pictured here. You can pick these up as MDF, you can pick them up at in various nice woods. You can pick them up in a neoprint battle mat, a much more thinner material. I'll put a link or two down below on some of the dice boxes that I really like and I own. Games Workshop even do on their special anniversary stores. They often have dice boxes, but either way, it allows me to roll my dice. They're going to be flat, they're going to be contained, and I'm not knocking my models with my dice roll. They're not going all over the shop. The other things that I like to have is a series of measuring instruments, my tape measure, my combat gauges, both a 3, a 6, and a 9-inch combat gauge. My tape measures, I want to have multiple tape measures. I want to make sure that I have enough to replace any that break, and they do break at times, but also some of the scenarios and battle plans that we play in, they often have a weird deployment. It's not always, 12 inches or 24 inches up. Sometimes we actually split the board like a diamond or like a triangle. So one great way of doing that is having a spare tape measure that splits the board, and then that defines your territory. Then you use a second instrument, a second measuring tape, to help you map out where you can deploy within that space. So having multiples is always going to be really helpful. The 3-inch combat gauges I find absolutely invaluable. I will always have 5 to 10 with me at any given time, and it's helpful for many reasons. On the 3-inch combat gauge that you can see pictured in the middle, it has the measurement on a half an inch, 1 inch, 2 inches, and 3 inches. Your half an inch is going to be great for piloting, making sure that you are landing the charge successfully. A 1 inch will help you to keep coherency as well as any 1 inch attacks. Your 2 inch obviously is going to be for 2 inch attacks. Your 3 inches are going to be for your pile-ins or any 3 inch attacks. But it also can be really helpful defensively. It allows you, as you're going to pile in or as you're trying to set up a movement or a charge, you can put these down across the table to either see where you want to engage in a combat, or if you're trying to avoid dragging an opponent's unit into combat, you might put the 3-incher down so that when you're piling in, you don't accidentally move within 3 of another unit and drag them into combat. So I always find them handy. They're great, and I have multiples of them. Your 6-inch combat gauges are helpful for often movement. Often a lot of units will have a movement or a 5 or a 6, so I like to use my combat gauges for that. In addition, when you're measuring to see how many models are within scoring of an objective, the 6-inch combat gauge can be really helpful. The 9-inch one is absolute gold. I don't have enough of them. You can always have multiples. And the reason for it is it's usually all. Whenever you have a unit that is summoned onto the table, is being reset up, coming in from reserve, teleports, whatever it might be, the rules almost always stipulate that you must be outside of 9 inches from enemy territory, an enemy. So what it does is as someone who might summon, it allows me to kind of map out my different options. But as an opponent, if I know that my opponent is going to be able to summon and I want to try to deny them from getting into the juicy parts, to block off an objective, to stop them from getting close to my key support heroes, or just generally trying to be annoying or protective, I can put down my 9-inch combat gauges to make sure I know where they can and can't be deployed. And the great thing as well is that these 3, these 6, and these 9-inch gauges can be picked up. You can 3D print them. They can often, there's free files. I'll put a link down below where you can find some free files for 3D printing if you know somebody or you have one yourself. But alternatively, you can pick them up online. There's a lot of people with a laser cutter who will cut these up for acrylics or MDF, and they can be quite cheap as well. So get yourself a number of these combat gauges, especially your 3s and your 9s. I love to have markers, and it surprises me how many people don't have objective markers when they come to the table. So you want to make sure that you not only have objective markers to mark where the objectives are going to be on the table, but also tokens that are going to help you mark what the terrain features are going to be. What terrain is mystical, arcane, deadly, sinister, all that stuff. We need something to mark those up. And you can buy dice. I'll put a link down below where you can get these dice on screen. But, just having some acrylic tokens or some type of, get yourself a base. Get yourself a 32 or a 40 mil base and write it with a texter that's going to be easy to read. But have some type of marker for your terrain features. And in addition, have enough objective tokens, whether, again, they're MDF, they're acrylic. The ones on screen here are made by Games Workshop for their anniversary. You may or may not want them, but either way, get something that's going to mark on the board where the objectives are going to be. In addition to all of that, speaking of marking, I like to track things, and I like to see the progression of the game as it goes along. Things like your game trackers and notebooks are invaluable. So when it comes to game trackers, I use a 3D printed one. I'll put a link down below of the one that I use. But if you buy the Warlords edition, which is like a bit of an upsell version of the General's Handbook, that will come with a game tracker as well. As I mentioned, you can get these 3D printed, you can buy them acrylically, whatever it might be. What makes these valuable is that I can, using a dice, keep a track of the turn, how many command points myself and my opponent has. I can track how many victory points myself and my opponent has. If my opponent or myself has other different points, let's say it's blood tie summoning or relentless discipline points for Ossiarch Bone Reapers or destiny dice, whatever it might be, you can keep a track of any special abilities as well with some of the game trackers. So, just keeping a track of the game is going to be really helpful. In addition to all of that, I like to write a lot of notes on my armies. I like to write down things like, did I get priority and what was the impacts of it? Did I give it away or did I keep it? How was the victory point progression over the full 5 rounds? Little different things. I tried this and this is what happened, or I deployed on the line and my opponent turn 1 charged me, or I dropped back to 7 inches, whatever it might be. I like to write notes about my games to learn and to think about what I'm going to do in my next interactions. And whether you buy the Games Workshop journal like what's on screen, or you just buy a blank notebook that you buy for schools, or you buy from whatever your supermarket might be, it's not about the book, it's about what you put in it. So for me, having yourself a journal and a notebook can be really helpful, and I'd highly recommend it. In addition to all of this, and in addition to keeping things on track, I like to track all my abilities and my wounds. So obviously wounds, you've got to do that, right? But don't just use D6, because sometimes it can be really hard to know what D6 is meant to be for rolling for hits and wounds. And sometimes we pick up those dice accidentally if we're also using them for wound counters. So I like to use Dungeons and Dragons style dice, having a D4, a D8, a D12, a D20. They're a different style of dice, and I know I'm not going to roll them obviously for my battle. So having them there can be really helpful, and you can pick them up at your local game stores. But also having some type of tokens to match the abilities that you're using, your spells, your command abilities, the various buffs and debuffs you're putting on various units, having some type of way to track them. Again, get yourself a blank base, write it down so it's very easy to see. The tokens here on the screen, I'll put a link down below. These are acrylic cut ones, or you can get them 3D printed, or I mentioned those War Scroll cards at the start, Games Workshop produce. They also come with ability tokens. So whatever it might be, what you want to avoid is having getting to combat and you remember you successfully cast Mystic Shield, but you forget which unit you put on. There's 2 units in combat and you forget which one's which, or you get into a bit of a debate with your opponent. Oh no, you put it on this one. Oh no, it was on this one. And at least having a token, it's very clear what ability is on and what abilities aren't on, and just it's a better game overall. When you go to events, often you will find you'll have running repairs. Things will break. Your models will come off their bases, weapons will snap, heroes will fall off their mounts. You'll have to do quick repairs on the go. For things like that, I like to have blue tack and I like to have super glue with me. The blue tack is a nice temporary solution that will get me through until the end of the day, or at least the lunch break. And for a more permanent solution, having super glue there will just be helpful just to repair my models and get it back. But as you know, super glue does take a little bit of time. So you might find that having both of them, especially blue tack, will just get you through till the end of the day until you get to that more permanent solution. When it comes to transport, I'm not talking about do I get to the event by car, by bus, by ferry, wherever it might be. I'm talking about transporting your models. And one of the things that I learned very quickly in tournaments is I don't want to keep packing and unpacking my army into its carry case, especially when I'm moving tables. So one way I get around it, and it's become quite common, is these bamboo plastic carry trays. You can pick them up at lifestyle shops, wherever you might live, but they're great because they cost you like $10 dues or $5 or whatever it might be. And, most people will use them to like bring their mum or bring their partner, or, bring them breakfast in bed, for example. But these are trays that are really helpful. You put your models on the tray. It means you're not packing and unpacking, and then you move them around the table, which is great. In addition to all of this, when I go to a larger tournament, something that I've recently fallen in love with are these service carts. Now, I don't take them to every event. It's just up my sleeve when I need to. But the service cart means that not only can I put my stuff on like a carry tray, I put it on the top shelf, I can put my tokens, my dice box, my books, my drinks, my food, snacks, you name it. I can put so many things on this service cart and just wheel it around the convention. So, like I said, I don't bring them to all events, but it is a helpful little tool that I use, especially at larger events. When it comes to my preparation, it's not just restricted to tokens and dice. It's having things like water and snacks and meals. It's having enough water to make sure that you are drinking plenty of water and staying hydrated through the game. And I'm not wasting time going to the bar and going to get myself drinks and getting in line and even spending money on water. I just make sure that I've got something with me at all times, and it helps me reduce spending too much money on soft drinks and things that I wouldn't normally drink. In addition, I like to have a bunch of snacks and a bunch of meals, especially for conventions. Conventions are notorious for having pretty sketchy meals. I don't want to eat like soggy cold sandwiches or, sushi I don't know how long's been in there outside for, or whatever it might be. So packaging, yogurt and berries, or salad and chicken, or whatever, something that will help you stay on track, I find really invaluable. It also means that I'm not waiting in lines for my food, and it means I'm getting to spend more of my lunch breaks socializing with friends, checking out convention halls, getting something, getting fresh air as opposed to waiting in line for food. My snacks, I love to have like high protein snacks, things like protein bars or nuts or even seasonal fruit. Just having that again, so I'm not eating like chocolates and chips. I'm not judging you if you like that, but I try to keep that to a minimum because the temptation is just too high. Some other things that I like to consider are your human maintenance, things like making sure your phone is fully charged. So I'll bring myself a power bank, just charge that up, make sure my phone is ready to go, especially because I use my phone for my war scrolls to take photos, take videos, post them on social, and also just keep in contact with my wife and things like that. So power bank, absolutely a necessity to me. Things like painkillers, you don't drink as much water as you probably should. You're concentrating for long periods of time, and sometimes those conventions can be quite loud. So I like to have a little bit of painkillers up my sleeve in case I need it. In addition, having deodorant and being able to reapply it throughout the day is critical. Having something to wash my hands with, where antibacterial hand wipes or antibacterial gels. If you are in a country like Australia where it gets quite hot, having a small gym towel as well can be really nice, just to pat yourself down and just keep yourself feeling a bit more human and normal, as opposed to being quite sweaty in some of the conventions at least Australia has, like CanCon. But this is not the only stuff that I bring to tournaments, and for me, it will vary. These things will vary, and when I go overseas to events, I'll often bring some Australian goodies to share with my opponent. Sometimes I will bring things, even domestically. Maybe it's club dice or something, a small token or a gesture, or, buy something for my opponent. It could be quite a nice little way to kick off the relationship, especially because if you're meeting a lot of new players. When I play with my Gloomspite Gits, I love to have a bit of fun. There's these candy lolly mushrooms that I can pick up in my local area that whenever I use my Fungoid Cave Shaman to eat one of its mushrooms off its war scroll and, cast a second spell, it's a bit of fun to offer your opponent a Death Cap mushroom and eat it along the way. I'll bring AOS Coach stickers, I'll bring random stuff, but ultimately, this is kind of like what I bring to events. And I would be curious to hear from you what do you bring to events? What have I missed off my list that maybe I should be considering bringing? Again, I like to be prepared. I like to have everything up my sleeve. There's been some assumptions. Obviously, if I'm bringing a notepad, I should have a pen. If I'm bringing my army, I need to make sure I have all the various things for my army. But leave a comment in the comment section below what you bring to events so we can all learn together. And I hope if you've never been to an event, this has helped you prepare for your first. And if you're a seasoned veteran, and hopefully some of this stuff is going to help you really improve or be more prepared for your next event. I hope you found that discussion valuable. If you did, give the video the old thumbs up. And if you have a comment or an insight, leave it in the comment section below. The champions over here are my AOS Coach Patreons and YouTube members. So you guys are bloody legends. Thank you for all the support. If you want to know more about the support programs, the links are below down here in the episode description, along with a link to the Discord server so we can continue this conversation. Until next time, don't forget to name your characters and have a good one.